Remember when rock and roll was still finding its voice? When bands wore matching suits and played sock hops at the local gym? The 60s gave us the Beatles and the Stones, sure, but they also gave us dozens of other incredible bands that rocked just as hard. Some of them had their moment in the sun and then faded into the background of music history. Today, we're bringing them back into the spotlight. These are 10 rock bands only 1960s kids will remember. Number 10. The Standells Los Angeles gave the world the Doors. The Standells were tearing up Sunset Strip with their raw garage rock sound. These guys weren't trying to be polished or pretty. They plugged in, turned up, and let it rip.
Oh, Boston, you're my home.
The band formed in 1962, and by the mid-60s, they'd landed themselves a residency at a Sunset Strip club where they became the house band. They wore all black. They had attitude. And when they released Dirty Water in 1966, they gave Boston an anthem it didn't even know it needed. The song peaked at number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it became a garage rock standard that bands are still covering today. Dick Dodd handled the drums and vocals, and his punchy delivery gave the Standells their edge. Tony Valentino's guitar work was sharp and aggressive, exactly what garage rock needed to be. They weren't concerned with complex arrangements or studio tricks. They wanted to capture the energy of a live show, and they did it better than most. The Standells released 4 albums between 1964 and 1967. Dirty Water remains their calling card. They could be snarling and defiant one minute, melodic and catchy the next. By 1968, the British invasion had crowded the market, and American garage bands started falling out of favor. The Standells broke up in 1968, but their influence didn't disappear. Punk rockers in the 70s looked back at bands like the Standells and found a blueprint for their own sound. The Standells proved you didn't need a big budget or fancy production to make rock and roll that mattered. Number 9. The Music Machine. If you wanted to see something strange and a little bit dangerous in 1966, you went to see The Music Machine. They showed up wearing all black. They wore a single black glove on one hand, and when they played, they sounded like nothing else on the radio.
I will cry out for justice, admit that I was wrong.
Sean Bonnewell led the band, and he had a vision that was darker and more intense than most of his peers. He wrote songs that were short, sharp, and loaded with distortion. When Talk Talk hit the airwaves in late 1966, it climbed all the way to number 15 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song was under 2 minutes long, driven by a fuzzy bass line and Bonnewell's sneering vocals. It didn't overstay its welcome. It said what it needed to say, and got out.
The situation and how it really stands.
The Music Machine's sound was aggressive and minimalist. Bonnewell didn't believe in wasting time with long instrumental breaks or elaborate harmonies. He wanted every song to hit hard and hit fast. Their debut album, released in 1966, was packed with tracks that followed that philosophy. Songs like The People in Me and Double Yellow Line had the same intensity as Talk Talk, and they showed that the Music Machine wasn't a one-hit wonder.
I guess I'm down to size.
But the music industry in the 60s was tough, and Bonnewell's uncompromising attitude didn't help. He clashed with his label over creative control, and band members started leaving. By 1967, the Music Machine was essentially just Bonnewell and a rotating cast of musicians. He changed the name to The Bonnewell Music Machine and kept recording, but the momentum was gone.
My name is really Mud. I'm up to hearing lies.
They never had another hit like Talk Talk, but their influence lingered. Punk bands in later decades recognized what Bonnewell was doing. He was stripping rock and roll down to its essentials and delivering it with an attitude that didn't care about being liked. The music machine burned bright and fast, and they left behind a legacy that outlasted their brief time in the spotlight.
Talk, 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 talk.
Number 8. The Electric Prunes. Psychedelia exploded in the mid-60s, and every band wanted a piece of it. The Electric Prunes got there early, and they got there with style. Formed in Los Angeles in 1965, they combined garage rock grit with the swirling, mind-bending sounds that defined the era. Their breakthrough came in 1966 with I Had Too Much to Dream, Last Night. The song opened with a reversed guitar effect that sounded like something from outer space, and it immediately grabbed your attention. It climbed to number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it became one of the defining songs of psychedelic rock. The Electric Prunes knew how to create atmosphere. They layered their sound with effects and studio tricks that made their music feel like a trip without ever leaving your living room. Jim Lowe handled vocals and guitar, and his voice had a haunting quality that fit perfectly with the band's sound. The rhythm section kept things tight while the guitars spiraled off into unexpected directions. Their self-titled debut album, released in 1967, showcased their range. They could be moody and introspective on tracks like Leuven, and then turn around and deliver something more driving and urgent on Get Me to the World on Time. But the psychedelic era was short-lived, and record labels started pushing bands in different directions. The Electric Prunes' later albums took them into more experimental territory, including a concept album based on a Latin mass. It was ambitious, but it wasn't what fans wanted, and the original lineup fractured. They broke up in 1970, but their early work remained influential. I Had Too Much to Dream, Last Night, has been featured in countless films and TV shows, and it's still regarded as one of the best psychedelic rock songs ever recorded. The Electric Prunes captured a moment in time when rock and roll was getting weird, and they did it with more creativity than most. Number 7. The Left Banke. Not every rock band in the 60s was trying to blow your mind with volume and distortion. Some of them wanted to break your heart, and the Left Banke did exactly that. They came out of New York in 1965, and they brought a level of sophistication to rock music that was rare for the time. Michael Brown was the genius behind the band. He was a classically trained musician, and he incorporated harpsichord, strings, and Baroque arrangements into their sound. When Walk Away Renee was released in 1966, it was unlike anything else on the radio. The harpsichord gave it an elegant, almost Renaissance quality, while the lyrics ached with longing. It reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it became one of the most romantic songs of the decade. Steve Martin handled lead vocals, and his voice was smooth and sincere. He delivered the lyrics with a vulnerability that made every word feel personal. Tom Finn played bass and co-wrote songs with Brown, and together they crafted melodies that were intricate and beautiful. The Left Banke sound was lush and cinematic, and it set them apart from the garage bands and British invasion groups dominating the charts. They followed up Walk Away Renee with Pretty Ballerina in 1967, which reached number 15. It had the same Baroque pop style, with layered harmonies and orchestral touches that made it feel grand and timeless. But behind the scenes, tensions were building. Michael Brown had a falling out with the rest of the band over creative differences, and he left before their second album was completed. Without Brown, the Left Banke struggled to maintain their sound. They released a second album in 1968, but it didn't have the same magic, and the band fell apart shortly after. They reunited briefly in the 70s, but they never recaptured the success of their early hits. Still, Walk Away Renee and Pretty Ballerina remain classics, and they influenced countless bands that followed. Number 6. The Chocolate Watch Band. San Jose's Chocolate Watch Band wasn't interested in being polite. They were a garage rock band with a punk attitude before punk even existed, and they brought a raw intensity to every performance. Formed in 1965, they were part of the San Francisco Bay Area music scene, and they quickly earned a reputation as one of the most exciting live acts around. Dave Aguilar was the frontman, and he commanded the stage with a swagger that was pure rock and roll. The band's sound was loud, fast, and aggressive. Their cover of Let's Talk About Girls became a regional hit in 1967, and it showcased everything that made them great. The guitars were fuzzy and distorted. The rhythm section was tight and driving, and Aguilar's vocals were full of attitude. The Chocolate Watch Band's original songs were just as strong as their covers. Tracks like Don't Need Your Lovin' and Are You Gonna Be There at the Love-In captured the energy of their live shows, and they proved the band could write their own material. They released 3 albums between 1967 and 1969, and each one was packed with high-energy rock and roll. But the music industry had other plans. Their label wanted them to be more commercial, and they started bringing in session musicians to soften their sound. The band resisted, but the damage was done. Their albums were tampered with, and their live energy was diluted in the studio. By 1970, they'd had enough and called it quits. The Chocolate Watch Band's influence lived on, though. When punk rock exploded in the 70s, people looked back and realized that bands like the Chocolate Watch Band had been doing it first. They were rebellious, unpolished, and unapologetically loud. They didn't last long, but they left their mark. Number 5. The Remains. Boston's The Remains should have been huge. They had the talent, the songs, and the stage presence to compete with anyone. They opened for the Beatles on their 1966 American tour, which should have launched them into the stratosphere. But sometimes, success just doesn't happen. Barry Toshian led the band, and he was a dynamic performer with a voice that could handle anything from soulful ballads to hard-driving rock. The Remains formed in 1964, and they quickly became one of the most popular bands in Boston. Their live shows were legendary, and they built a following that packed clubs night after night. In 1966, they released their self-titled album, and it was filled with strong material. Songs like Why Do I Cry and Don't Look Back showed they could write catchy, hook-filled rock songs that held up against anything coming out of England. Their cover of Diddy Wah Diddy was energetic and fun, and it became a staple of their live set. But despite opening for the Beatles and earning critical praise, commercial success eluded them. Their album didn't chart, and radio stations didn't pick up their singles. The Beatles tour should have been their big break, but it didn't translate into record sales. By 1966, the music industry was oversaturated with bands, and it was hard to stand out. The Remains broke up in 1966, just as they were gaining momentum. Toshian went on to have a successful career as a solo artist and session musician. But the Remains were done. They left behind one excellent album and a reputation as one of the best live bands of the 60s. They deserved more, but sometimes that's just how it goes. Number 4. The Seeds Los Angeles. They formed in 1965, and they brought a raw, primal energy that was impossible to ignore. Sky Saxon was the frontman, and he was a wild, unpredictable performer who gave every show everything he had. Pushin' Too Hard was their breakthrough, released in 1966. It started slow, building tension before exploding into a driving, insistent rocker. Saxon's vocals were urgent and almost desperate, and the band's fuzzy guitars and pounding drums created a sound that was both hypnotic and aggressive. The song eventually peaked at number 36 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it became a garage rock anthem. The Seeds weren't just about one song, though. Their debut album, released in 1966, was packed with strong tracks that showcased their range. Can't Seem to Make You Mine was another standout, with its moody atmosphere and catchy melody. The Seeds could be dark and brooding 1 minute, frantic and intense the next. Saxon embraced the psychedelic movement as it grew, and the Seeds' later albums reflected that shift. They experimented with longer, more improvisational tracks, and their sound became heavier and more experimental. Albums like Future and A Web of Sound pushed boundaries, but they also alienated some fans who wanted the straightforward garage rock of their early work. By 1972, the Seeds had run their course, and they broke up. Saxon continued making music on his own, but the Seeds were done. Their early work, especially Pushin' Too Hard, remains influential, and garage rock bands still look to them as pioneers of the sound. Number 3. Chicago's The Shadows of Night. They formed in 1964, and they quickly became known as one of the hardest rocking bands in the Midwest. Their cover of Gloria in 1966 took them's original and made it even rawer and more aggressive. Jim Soanes was the lead singer, and his voice was rough and powerful. He didn't try to sound pretty or polished, he just belted it out with everything he had. The band's version of Gloria stripped away some of the original's subtlety and replaced it with pure energy. It reached number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it became their signature song. The Shadows of Night's original material was just as strong. Oh Yeah and Bad Little Woman were both tough, blues-influenced rockers that showed the band could write their own hits. Their debut album, released in 1966, captured the energy of their live shows, and it's still regarded as one of the best garage rock albums of the era. But success was fleeting. The music industry shifted, and garage rock fell out of favor as psychedelia and heavier rock took over. The Shadows of Night tried to adapt, but their later albums didn't have the same impact. By 1969, the original lineup had dissolved, and the band faded from the national spotlight. They left behind a legacy, though. Their version of Gloria became the definitive take on the song, and garage rock bands have been covering it ever since. The Shadows of Night proved that American bands could rock just as hard as their British counterparts, and they did it with a Chicago grit that was all their own. Number 2, Question Mark and the Mysterians' Flint. Michigan gave the world one of the strangest and most memorable rock bands of the 60s. Their frontman went by the single name Question Mark, and he wore sunglasses at all times, claiming to be from Mars. In 1966, they released 96 Tears, and it became an instant classic. The song was built around a simple, hypnotic organ riff played on a Vox Continental. It was a song about heartbreak, but it had an edge that made it feel dangerous. 96 Tears shot to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it became one of the defining songs of 1966.
I'll just cry, I'll just cry.
The band's follow-up single, I Need Somebody, reached number 22, proving they weren't just a one-hit wonder. But their mysterious image and unconventional approach made them difficult to market, refused to reveal his real identity, and the band's live shows were theatrical and unpredictable.
You're gonna cry 96 years. You're gonna...
Their moment in the spotlight was brief. By 1968, they'd broken up, unable to replicate the success of 96 Tears. But that song never went away. It's been covered by everyone from Aretha Franklin to the Stranglers, and it remains a staple of 60s rock compilations. And the Mysterians captured something raw and real, and they did it with a sense of mystery that made them unforgettable.
Come on, let me hear you cry now. 96 years. Woo! I wanna hear you.
Number 1. The Buckinghams Chicago's.
Kind of a drag when your baby don't love you.
The Buckinghams started as a local band playing covers at high school dances. But by 1967, they'd become one of the most successful rock bands in America. They had a polished, horn-driven sound that set them apart from the garage bands and British invasion groups.
Kind of a drag when you know she's been untrue.
Kind of a Drag was their first big hit, released in late 1966. It was a ballad with a melancholy melody and lush harmonies, and it struck a chord with listeners. The song climbed all the way to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early 1967, making the Buckinghams one of the few American bands to top the charts during the height of the British invasion.
Kind of a drag when you feel like you wanna cry.
They followed it up with a string of hits throughout 1967. Don't You Care reached number 6. Hey Baby, They're Playing Our Song, peaked at number 12. The Buckinghams had found a formula that worked, blending rock with pop sensibilities and brass arrangements that gave their songs a full, sophisticated sound. Dennis Tufano handled lead vocals, and his voice was smooth and expressive. Carl Giamorese's guitar work was tasteful and melodic, and the addition of horns gave the Buckinghams a sound that was more mature than most of their peers. They were a band that parents could approve of while still being cool enough for teenagers. But by 1970, the music landscape had changed. Hard rock and heavy psychedelia were taking over, and the Buckinghams' polished pop sound felt out of place. They broke up in 1970, and while they reunited for occasional tours in later years, their moment had passed. They left behind a catalog of hits that still get played on oldies radio, and they proved that American bands could compete with the best. The 60s were full of bands that burned bright and then disappeared. Some of them got one hit and faded away. Others never got the recognition they deserved. But for those of us who were there, who bought the records and went to the shows, these bands were part of the soundtrack of our lives. They were playing at the sock hop, on the jukebox at the diner, or crackling through your transistor radio late at night. If you remember any of these bands, drop a comment and let us know which one was your favorite. And if you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more forgotten gems from the greatest decade in rock and roll.